your mask. With it, I shall take over the world. Come on.
It is difficult to say what has happened to our enemies, but I doubt we will see them for a long time.
While Crash Bandicoot n.tropy Trilogy and Crash Team Racing Nitro Fueled were great games, they were remakes, they weren't original games, even with all the content they added. Crash Bandicoot 4 is an actual game this time, and not a remake. It's the first game in the series in 10 years. Also, if you don't count mobile games, then it's the first game on consoles in 12 years. And if you don't consider Crash of the Titans and Mind Over Mutant as Crash games, then you might say that Crash 4 is the first game in 14 years. And if we're talking about the main games in the series, then it's the first game in 16 years. Or if you're like Sony, then it's the first game in 22 years. But anyway, enough about that, since it's been a very long time since the last Crash game on consoles, or Crash game in general. It's continuing right after Crash Bandicoot War, instead of continuing after Mind Over Mutant, or rather a reboot. It ignores everything that's not made by a Naughty Dog, at least story-wise. Is this a game that's worth waiting for all these years? Or should the franchise just die already? Now let's find out. After playing Insane Trilogy and I enjoyed it, but they did make a few changes that made me feel that Insane Trilogy is more of a reboot as well than a remake or a remaster. Like the biggest one is how they named the Warp Room in Warp as a Time Twister. So I did feel that we might be getting a reboot of the series or something, and Crash Bandicoot 4 is one of them. However, according to the developers, it's more of an alternate timeline thingy. And no, it's not just an excuse. Many characters and many things from the series do appear as Easter eggs regarding how they continue after Warp instead of Mind Over Mutant. Honestly, let's be honest. If they ignored all of the past non-Naughty Dog games, it's the right move. Wrath of Cortex barely had a plot, and on top of that, it was basically Warp but worse. Crash to Insanity has a lot of plot holes, mainly because of the cut content, and remaking it is not as simple as people act. I'm probably one of the few people that actually enjoyed Crash of the Titans and Mind Over Mutant, especially the latter, but even I have to admit that they're not Crash Bandicoot games. They both have worked better as their own series. Crash Bandicoot 4 has actually, rather than starting from scratch, they decide to continue with Warp, and they actually explain how Uka, Dr. Cortex and n.tropy return. And if you haven't noticed, the game is story driven. Do not worry, I won't spoil the game for you. I'll tell you what happens in the trailer. Basically, Uka, Dr. Cortex and n.tropy finally escape their time prison. However, they shatter the multi-dimension and they break the portals to many gateways throughout the universe. For a simple game, it's actually a good story. It has some funny moments, some intense moments. You'd be surprised by how great it is. Also, I do feel that the final act, while great, feels like it could have been an epilogue or something, like an extended. But anyway, that's more me. Now, regarding the redesign. Everybody hated it at first, but honestly, it's actually pretty cool. Crash actually looks way better this way, and Koko, while she's not as cute as her Insane Trilogy version or Nitro Fueled version, which is actually still cute, especially in her skins, which we'll talk about later. Cortex, well, I do admit that it's not exactly my favorite in this design, but still a great design. The rest are different. While Dingodile is basically the same but just fatter, and Tauna here is a different character, the rest, well, they look like their original version. Design-wise, it's not exactly something you can get used to. You get used to them quickly and you will like them. There are two reasons that you will prefer this design over the Insane Trilogy. One, this is more original. The Insane Trilogy version was basically playing it safe. Two, this redesign works a lot well with the inverted mode. I don't really think it will work well with the Insane Trilogy. We'll talk about inverted mode later, but for now, let's talk about the gameplay. There are 5 characters here that you play with. Crash and Koko are basically the same, and this time you can use them in any level, even the bosses. However, you can switch between them in Flashback Tapes level, which we'll talk about later again. How do they play? Well, you play the Insane Trilogy, they play the same. But however, they're a lot better than the Insane Trilogy. If you haven't noticed, Crash and Koko were heavier in Insane Trilogy, to the point that sometimes there are certain places you might not be able to reach. However, in this version, they actually control a lot better, and they're a lot lighter, and they slide faster, and and their jump is a little higher, so they fix the controls from the Insane Trilogy. Now let's talk about the masks. As for the power-ups, they don't return here, other than the double jump of course. The double jump is something that should be in platformers, so it sticks with you here. The power-ups are gone here, so don't expect to defeat a boss and earn something. You still do get some certain power-ups, however, but rather than being gimmicks, they're more like power-ups that you collect. And these are the quantum masks. They don't stay with you forever, but they will appear to you at certain moments in the game when you need them, and you will use them, and once you're done using them, they will be gone. Don't worry about them disappearing. They will disappear when the time is right. They're not like Aqua Mask where you have a certain amount of time. It basically depends on how you progress the level. Anyway, the quantum masks here are actually pretty cool. The first is Loni, the mask of visibility. He makes certain objects appear for you, and certain obstacles as well. However, this costs you at one thing. Certain objects and obstacles will also disappear. The second is Akano, the mask of matter. He's basically a beefed up version of the tornado spin. He makes your power up stronger by basically making you spin a lot stronger and faster. With his spin you will be able to glide, and you will be able to break those iron crates easily without the need to smack them. However, be on the lookout, as his spins are endless, but you will also be moving slightly if you don't move. And then we also have Kopunawa, the Mask of Time. Obviously, as I said, the Mask of Time, so her power-ups will make you slow down time for a certain bit of time. That way you can basically slow down certain obstacles, and you can also work on nitro crates. However, be on the lookout, as she's not more than 5 seconds. Watch out and be quick. And last but not least, Ika. He is the mask of gravity. He turns the world upside down for you as you basically walk on walls. However, be on the lookout, because once you walk on walls, the sky will basically be like pitfalls. These are the quantum masks. They're designed to make you use them more. If you haven't noticed, they're designed to be more as in for puzzle solving, rather than making the game easier. The quantum masks are available only for Crash and Koko, so don't expect to use them with Cortex, Doulla, or Tauna. Now, speaking of which, let's talk about the other 3 playable characters. Tauna Bandicoot is, if you have played Crash to Insanity and remember Nina Cortex, well, she plays a lot like her, but with a minor difference. She is actually my least favorite character, since you don't use the grappling hook a lot like in to Insanity, but you still use her. Nevertheless, she's still fun to play with. Anyway, Tauna Bandicoot has the grappling hook. You can use it to attack other enemies from far away or even touch certain places. You can also use it to go from one place to another, depends on the location. Her power-ups wise are basically very similar to Crash and Koko. She does kick but doesn't spin, and she also uses Power Slam. She has a grappling hook instead of the mask. Dingodile, on the other hand, is very different, and he's my favorite among the 3. If you played Ratchet and Clank and remember that suck cannon, then you pretty much know how this works, a little. His cannon can suck almost everything in front of him. You can even suck TNT crates and throw them at opponents. However, be on the lookout, as you can also suck nitro crates, and of course they will explode. His cannon can also be used to glide and float for certain places. And finally, Dr. Cortex. Out of all the characters, he's actually the slowest and the hardest, but his levels focus a lot more on puzzle. If you played to Insanity, then don't expect him to play the same. This time you have unlimited bullets, or rather you don't have bullets at all. You have the blockification gun, which basically transforms your enemies into projectiles. You can use it to transform them into platforms so that you can jump on them, or bouncers so that you can float as well. Keep jumping. He also has a dash ability with the circle. You press it and you'll move quickly to a certain place. You can use that when you jump as well. Now, gameplay wise, it's actually really, and I mean really hard. All the gameplay may be simple, but this doesn't change that the game is extremely hard. At first I thought that this circle thingy that you add on to your character is stupid, as it's basically like making the game easier than it already is in my opinion. But no, it turns out that you'll need it a lot, as you're going to die a lot, and I mean a lot. If you don't like this circle thing, you can always disable it, but trust me, you don't want to. I always thought the game was easy because of that circle thingy, but however I knew I was wrong. The moment I saw the trophy list, I knew that I was wrong, as one of them requires you to collect all the platinum relics as well. Speaking of which, it has nothing to do with the tornado spin, but rather an alternative to the speedy boots. You basically spin 3 times with Crash and Koko, and you'll move faster. Now, a lot of people have been saying that this is a lot better than the speedy shoes, but honestly, it's super hard to understand how to do it. It's not exactly hard to know it, but since this is platinum relics, since this is the relics that you need to get fast to, you'll always press on the buttons in the wrong way without looking. Maybe that's me, but it takes a lot of time to get used to. Also, this is not the only thing that's difficult about the game. All the levels have 6 gems now. Depending on how much you collect, you'll get 3 maximum for collecting 80% of all Wampa fruits in the game. You can't spend them anymore, by the way. And 1 for, of course, breaking all the crates. While this may sound simple, but Toys for Bob has actually hit the crates very well this time. It's very normal to finish the level and you miss 1 crate. I'll upload a guide on how to find them though, so don't worry. Another one you get for not dying more than 3 times in the game. While this may sound simple, the game is hard, and you might want to not die at all if you want to get that insanely perfect relic, which is a new collectible here in the game. You basically have to break all the crates and collect 80% of the Wumpa fruits, but without dying, not even once. You can of course die in bonus levels, which actually have hazards this time and sometimes have enemies. And you'll die a lot in it, I'm ashamed to say it, but anyway. Insanely perfect relics are actually required for completing the game, and they can be really hard. Fortunately, you don't need to do this in the inverted levels. You can do it either in either level, the normal or the inverted. But we'll talk about that later. And last but not least, hidden gems. These are obviously gems that you will find hidden in the level. They're actually very fun to find, even though they can be hidden really well. But nevertheless, they're actually fun. There are no death roads this time in the game, and colored gems are actually returned. Unfortunately, there's only 4 of them this time. The purple one is gone. Colored gems are actually pretty fun to find this time, similar to how you needed search for clues, like in Crash 2, and they're actually pretty fun. Be on the lookout to see the walls in the game. They'll give you many hints on how to find them. So yeah, the game is actually pretty hard, but it's actually pretty fun. While I do admit that sometimes it relies on trial and error, but nevertheless, it's actually pretty fun and rewarding. But here's the things that I don't like. The levels of Tauna, Cortex, and Doulla. Honestly, I never expected them to have so many levels. One thing that I don't like is how their levels are mostly cut in half. Most of them. Their levels are usually the alternate timeline levels. They're optional levels and not required to beat the story, but they're required to complete the game, of course, and explain certain parts of the story. The thing is, their levels are usually cut in half, like I said. The first half you play as Doulla, Tauna, or Cortex, depends on the level. However, the other half is usually you playing as Crash or Koko. And that other half is always taken from another level that you just played. It's meant to explain a certain part of the story, but it's basically just lazy, in my opinion. Not only that, you'll be forced to repeat many certain hard parts of a level as a result, especially the last level. Now, soundtrack wise, it's actually pretty awesome, and it's really well made. It actually feels like it's Naughty Dog who created it back then. You should really listen to it. The Crash Bandicoot series is always known for being a very short game, as you usually can complete it in about a few hours or something. However, Crash Bandicoot 4 actually does otherwise. It's actually the longest game in the series. This game has way more levels than the Insane Trilogy combined, which had over 100 levels. Not only does this have over 100 levels, but also has multiplayer, and this is also one game, as opposed to Insane Trilogy, which was 3 games. So before I talk about the multiplayer, I'll talk about the amount of content that the game had. 43 levels, and their inverted version, so that makes it 86. And we also got the flashback levels, which are approximately 21 levels, so that makes it over 107 levels, which is really a lot. There's actually multiplayer in the game. It's not online actually, but it's actually pretty fun. If you remember Super Mario Bros., the original games on the NES, You basically had to play, and when someone dies, you switch turns. When Mario dies, Luigi plays, and so on. This game is very similar to that, and with its own rules. It has certain rules like who can be the fastest, who can break the most crates, and so on. It's actually pretty cool. Up to 4 players can play. Crash, Koko, Fake Crash, and for the first time ever, Fake Koko. You can play with either of them however you want. And you know what's the best part about it? Only one controller is needed. It's called pass and play in the game. Now, let's talk about inverted mode and the flashback tapes. Many games have a mirror mode where you basically play the game sideways, or you basically play the game the other way. For example, if you have to go left in a game, mirror mode makes you go right. I was never really a fan of this game. Even in Nitro Fuel that has it, I wasn't really a fan of it. It's basically like the same game, even if they're going to change sideways or anything. However, inverted mode is basically a mirror mode, but actually with a twist. The levels are actually changed. Each map in the series makes you play it in a different perspective, in a different way, but they change the theme of the level, so it makes it a lot different than how it's supposed to be. And sometimes it actually affects the gameplay. It's actually pretty cool and makes it like I'm playing a different level. For example, in the Pirates level, the levels are black and white, but everything you do will add colors to the game. It's actually pretty awesome. In normal levels, you'll have to find flashback tapes. These are basically tapes that you will find in the level. You have to collect them without dying. Finding them isn't really hard. They're basically like the old crystals. Crystals aren't available in the game, by the way. But they're basically like the old crystals where you have to find them. They'll be in front of you. Finding them isn't hard. But finding them without dying is the hard part, as you basically have to collect them without dying. If you collected them, then broke a checkpoint, and then died, don't worry, you'll still have it. So anyway, the levels are basically side-scrolling levels, where you basically play Crash or Koko, depending on the level, so you don't switch characters this time. You can still change skins however you want. But anyway, you basically play as Crash or Koko in a side-scrolling level similar to the bonuses, and they're meant to be a prequel to the series, explaining how Dr. Cortex created Crash and why, and so on. They're actually pretty fun, and focus more on puzzling. By the way, I forgot to mention, unlike Crash 2 and Warp, there are no warp rooms or time twisters this time. Instead, it's a bit more linear, like Crash 1, where you go through maps from one map to another. However, unlike Crash 1, there are more than one map, so there's variety. The reason they did this obviously because the game is tour driven. However, there's slightly less variety in levels compared to other games. But however, they're not like Night Trance where all the levels are either three types of levels. The reason there's less variety is mainly depending on the map. For example, in the first map, you're basically in insane trilogy, so all the levels are going to be about beach and jungles and so on. But don't worry, you won't feel that other than those alternate timeline levels, you won't feel that you're playing the same level again. There are also a few minor improvements here that actually affect the game. Like for example, for the first time ever, you can actually restart a level anytime you want. That feature was only exclusive to the time trials mode. Time trials now have ghosts. Similar to how racing games in the series have it, time trials now have it. And they're actually pretty helpful. However, if you don't like this feature, you can always disable it anytime you want. Before I end the video, I should let you know one thing. Some of the voice actors were replaced. They were working on the animatronics show, I think, so they weren't able to appear. The new voice actors are actually pretty great. You probably didn't even know that they were replaced until I told you so. Except for the two that you probably noticed. Tauna and Koko. While Tauna is understandable since she's a different character here, but Koko has been replaced. Perry isn't in the game, unfortunately. The new voice actress is great, but let's be honest here. Only Perry can voice Koko. She's the best one. But like I said, the new voice actors are great. So, in short, while the game may be really, and I mean really hard, it's all worth it. Everything in the game is amazing. Between the graphics, the gameplay, the music, and even the story, it's actually funny and amazing. I actually consider this game to be the best game in the series. The gameplay is amazing, and honestly, I wouldn't mind saying this, but this is actually better than the Crash Bandicoot games on the PlayStation 1. Nitro Fuel is still my favorite, of course, but we're talking about the main games, the platform ones. I give this a solid 9.5 out of 10. Thank you guys for watching this video. I really hope you enjoyed my review, and if you do, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time for more.